Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Chair Vanessa Atterbury of the Ways and Means Committee, and we have a joint hearing with the full Ways and Means Committee and the Appropriations, Early Education, and Economic Development Subcommittee with that chair, Stephanie Smith. So thank you for all of our appropriations colleagues for being with us here today. I want to start. Oh, someone is a little, okay, there we go. I want to start by thanking everyone for being here and just kind of talking a little bit about how far we've come on this topic. Over the last 4 years, Maryland has increased the child care scholarship enrollment by more than 200%. So I'm going to say that again, 200%. That means because of our hard work, everyone on this Zoom, tens of thousands of more children are in safe educational settings every day, learning, growing, and getting ready for school. It means more parents, especially mothers, have been able to return to the workforce here in Maryland. It's an extraordinary achievement, and it's one that I am personally proud of as a legislator and, more importantly, as a mother. But of course, we all know that these things aren't easy and they don't happen in a straight line. During last session, the state had to implement an enrollment freeze in the scholarship program, and I think we were all very disappointed about that. The only reassurance that we had was that that freeze would end in September. It is now October, and that freeze has not been lifted. That is not what we hoped for, and it's certainly not where we want that program to stay. So that's why I've called for this briefing today. We're going to begin working through what it will take to end the freeze, and more importantly, to make sure the children and families who need help the most receive that help. Ending the freeze is going to be my priority this upcoming legislative session. But ending the freeze is just a first step, and I think everyone on this meeting understands that. Because the progress we have made in the past 4 years has been about building the state into something bigger. It's been about building a system where every Maryland family has access to affordable, high-quality childcare. That vision is going to take time, it's going to take vision, and it's going to take buy-in. It's going to take buy-in from all of our local jurisdictions, and it's going to take a significant investment. To illustrate the scale, if Maryland funded care for all children from birth to age 2, so let's just start with 2, it would cost more than $2 billion in additional funding. And that's a very large number. But working towards that long-term goal, it is the right thing to do. And the progress we've made in the last 4 years shows that this is possible if we stay the course and we continue to work hard. And all of you know me, and my colleagues, you guys know me. I do not shy away from the hard tasks and these types of challenges, particularly when it comes to our children in the state of Maryland. So again, I want to thank you all for being here, and we are going to begin by hearing from our amazing superstars at the Department of Legislative Services about where our current programs stand, what issues we're seeing, and what options exist. Then we will hear from the Maryland Family Network about their recommendations and what they want to prioritize for the 2026 session. And with that, I will turn it over to the Department of Legislative Services, Ms. Laura Hyde and superstar Alistar. I don't know who's going to go first, but whoever wants to go first, go right ahead.
I'm going to go first, Chair Atterbury. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Hyde. I am appropriations staff for the Economic and Education Development Committee. And we're going to start the presentation by I'm going to go first, and then Alistair is going to follow up. And so we'll start. So I just want to provide this brief overview. This presentation has 3 objectives: to provide a brief overview of childcare in Maryland, discuss the status of Maryland childcare through the framework of provider capacity, teacher supply, affordability, and quality, and provide details on state funding for childcare, the childcare scholarship program, and policy concerns for the 2026 session. Next slide, please. Maryland funds numerous childcare programs for families, providers, and educators in the annual operating budget. Family programs include the Child Care Scholarship Program, formerly known as the Child Care Subsidy Program, Patty Centers, the Therapeutic Child Care Grant Program, and Head Start. For providers and educators, Maryland offers the Excels Quality Rating Program, as well as child care capacity building programs funded as part of Blueprint for Maryland's future legislation. And these include the Child Care Credential Program, Child Care Career and Professional Development Fund, Child Care Accreditation Support Fund, and Child Care Incentive Grant Program. Next slide, please. In fiscal 2026, state funds for childcare in the operating budget totaled $442.8 million. The majority of these funds are allocated for the Child Care Scholarship Program, which totaled $414.2 million, or 93.6% of state funds. Blueprint capacity building programs received $9.8 million, which includes $5.7 million allocated for the Child Care Credential Program. Other programs received $18.7 million, or 4.2% of total funds. Note that this list of state-funded programs does not include capital programs, infant and toddler services, and duty centers, which are not considered childcare. Next slide, please. Since 2017, the General Assembly has passed 18 bills focused on childcare. In the next few slides, I will summarize these bills and focus on a few important legislative actions. From 2017 to 2021, legislators passed bills to mandate funding for Head Start, adjusted child care subsidy rates to the 60th percentile of the market rate, and required MSDE to conduct analyses of reimbursement rates for the Child Care Scholarship Program. Chapters 36 and 55 of 2021 Blueprint for Maryland's Future Implementation allocated Blueprint special funds for duty centers, the Maryland Excels program, and Blueprint capacity building programs, codified existing professional development programs, such as the Maryland Child Care Credential Program, and required certain funding levels and increases for Blueprint child care initiatives. Next slide, please. In 2022, chapters 2025 and 525 and 526 changed the Child Care Scholarship Program by requiring MSDE to issue co-payments for some public benefit program participants, removed child care payments from income, created presumptive eligibility, and placed limits on provider payment times. Also in 2022, the General Assembly passed legislation to establish the Therapeutic Child Care Grant Program and the Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Support Program, as well as support for child care providers through stabilization grants, employee bonuses, and revolving loans. Next slide, please. From 2023 to 2025, legislation on the Child Care Scholarship Program restricted MSDE from changing key policies and prohibited an increase in co-payment levels. Legislation also extended funding for the Child Care Credential Program to fiscal 2026 and for the Therapeutic Child Care Grant Program to fiscal 2029. Next slide, please. Last year, in 2025, child care legislation resulted in actions to support the supply of child care facilities, including prohibiting actions that limit the expansion of child care facilities, providing tax exemptions, and requiring an assessment of whether state-owned buildings would be suitable locations for child care facilities. Legislation also required the Maryland Benefit Exchange to promote access to health insurance for child care professionals, required MSDE to analyze regulations, and expanded the Child Care Scholarship Program to allow parenting foster youth to participate. Next slide, please. Research on childcare indicates that 4 intersecting factors determine the challenges of childcare supply and demand. These challenges are provider capacity, teacher supply, affordability, and quality. For example, high costs to open a childcare facility is one of the many challenges involving provider capacity. Teacher supply is hampered by low wages, minimal benefits, higher education capacity, and the availability of higher wage employment in other economic sectors. Affordability is impacted by high demand for limited childcare slots, which leads to higher costs. And although high-quality programs are desirable because they have low child-to-staff ratios, they can also represent a trade-off with potentially higher costs. The next set of slides discusses these factors and challenges in greater detail. Next slide, please. In Maryland, there are three categories of childcare providers: family childcare home, childcare center, or large family childcare home. The average in-home daycare has 4 to 6 children and costs approximately $37,000 per year to run, with a profit margin of approximately 1% after paying provider wages. Opening a childcare facility also requires an extensive application and regulatory review process prior to licensing or pursuing additional accreditation or quality ratings. Next slide, please. Currently in Maryland, approximately 300,000 children need childcare. There are 6,700 licensed providers and approximately 200,000 licensed slots, not including informal childcare such as nannies, babysitters, or unlicensed providers. This leaves a childcare gap of approximately 30% of the potential need, with the majority of the shortfall of slots in urban areas and less supply and access in rural areas. As I will show in the next slide, Maryland experienced a significant decrease in slots during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the number of slots has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. Next slide, please. This graph shows that from fiscal 2020 to 2024, the state has had a decrease of 10,927 licensed childcare slots, or approximately 5%, from 216,410 slots in fiscal 2020 to 205,483 slots in fiscal 2024. The largest decrease took place from fiscal 2020 to 2021, with a loss of 10,419 slots, or 5.1% of total slots. After this one-year loss, slots have not returned to pre-pandemic levels, showing a slight gain of 239 slots in fiscal 2022, and then a combined loss of approximately 1,110 slots, or 0.5%, in fiscal 2023 and 2024. Next slide, please. In addition to the 2025 legislation discussed previously, MSDE and counties have implemented a number of programs to build provider capacity. For example, the Growing Opportunities for Family Childcare program, which started in Montgomery County and is now available in most counties in Maryland, seeks to increase childcare providers in areas with above average rates of poverty and unemployment. The Child Care Capital Support Revolving Loan Fund provides no-interest loans for capital expenses to child care providers who participate in MSD's Child Care Scholarship Program. In prior years, the Maryland Rebuilds Grant provided funding for organizations to increase the number of child care workers, and the Child Care Stabilization Grant, allocated as part of COVID-19 federal stimulus funding, prevented the permanent closure of many child care programs across the state. Next slide, please. Programs enacted as part of Chapters 36 and 55 of 2021, Blueprint for Maryland's Future, use Blueprint special funds for programs to increase provider capacity. These programs include the Child Care Accreditation Support Fund, which offers reimbursement for provider applications or program improvement costs, and the Child Care Incentive Grant Program, which provides awards for materials, equipment, and supplies. Next slide, please. A second factor in childcare demand and supply is teacher supply. Teacher supply is influenced by a number of factors, including annual wages, benefits, training, and credentialing. Although average annual salaries vary by geographic area, type of teacher, and type of provider, Maryland childcare teachers typically earn minimum wage, which is about $31,000 per year. For lead teachers, the salary range is slightly above minimum wage, from $37,000 to $43,000 per year. Provider salaries average slightly below minimum wage, which reflects the amount of salary available for the provider after accounting for expenses. Next slide, please. Because teacher supply includes both teacher recruitment and retention, low wages are not the only reason that teacher supply can be a challenge. Lack of benefits, training requirements compared to other minimum wage jobs, and more desirable careers or jobs can also be reasons that individuals do not choose childcare as a profession. Next slide, please. With those challenges in mind, in addition to the legislation mentioned previously, 2 blueprint programs are also designed to increase teacher supply. Although it received its last year of funding in fiscal 2026, the Child Care Credential Program provides bonuses for training and credential attainment. The Child Care Career and Professional Development Fund provides funding for child care workers interested in degree attainment and prioritizes workers who have not attended college. Next slide, please. Another factor in childcare supply and demand is affordability. The federal government's definition of affordable childcare is care that costs less than 7% or less of family income. In Maryland, with a median family income of approximately $89,000, average childcare for 2 to 4-year-olds equals 16.7% of income, with infant care costs potentially over 20% of median family income. With this high cost of childcare, Maryland is ranked 6th out of 50 states for most expensive care. More importantly, for a minimum wage worker, expenses spent on childcare could be as much as 60% of median income. Next slide, please. In addition to the high cost of childcare, other barriers to affordability include rising infant care and home-based care costs, a low teacher-to-child ratio of 1 to 3 in Maryland for infants and toddlers, which means higher costs for lower facility capacity, stagnant growth in total income, which means that increases in childcare costs are not offset by wage increases, inflation, and worker attrition, which influences teacher supply. Next slide, please. Maryland's programs for childcare assistance focus on the affordability challenges faced by low-income families. The Child Care Scholarship Program, which was formerly the Child Care Subsidy Program, receives federal and state funds for low-income families to afford childcare. This program will be discussed later in the presentation. In public schools, low-income students can attend Early Head Start and Head Start. Families can also utilize PADI centers, which are free support centers for families from birth to age 3. And in Montgomery County, the Working Parents Assistant Program is a private public fund run by volunteers that provides child care subsidies to eligible families. Next slide, please. To sum up this analysis on affordability, it's important to note that the broader research on the effects of access to affordable childcare indicates that affordable childcare strengthens broader economic health and leads to outcomes such as increased productivity, increased state revenues, greater economic security for working families, increased potential earning potential for women, and improved educational and economic outcomes for children. Next slide, please. The final factor in childcare supply and demand is childcare quality. Childcare quality refers to both provider or setting quality as well as teacher quality. In Maryland, childcare centers and family childcare homes must be licensed. Licensed childcare providers can also pursue Maryland accreditation or participate in Maryland Excels, which is a program that focuses on quality indicators that take into account the learning environment and interactions with students. Individual teacher quality is measured by credential levels that take into account individuals' credentials, experience, and education. These credential levels are part of the Maryland's Child Care Credential Program, which is discussed in a future slide. Next slide, please. In terms of provider quality, Maryland accreditation is a 24-month process that includes a self-appraisal, a program improvement plan, and technical assistance as needed. Accreditation is maintained for 5 years, with years 4 and 5 restarting the accreditation cycle. The Maryland Excels program, which is available to providers who are licensed, is a 5-level quality rating and improvement system that provides incentives to encourage high-quality childcare. Excels offers an initial bonus for any provider participating in the program and continued bonuses for higher quality rating levels. Next slide, please. 70% of eligible licensed childcare programs in Maryland participate in Excels, with 1,784 providers joining since fiscal 2022. In fiscal 2024, MSDE reported that 34% of all childcare facilities participating in Excels had a rating of 3, 4, or 5, although the number of facilities that participate with non-compliance indices has increased in recent years. Excels offers a bonus every year if a level 5 quality rating is maintained. Next slide, please. The purpose of the Maryland Child Care Credential Program is to produce a high-quality child care workforce. To increase the number of teachers who meet this goal, the program offers increased compensation for child care teachers, recognizes teacher credit and non-credit career preparation, and provides a structure for professional development and growth through professional competencies. Next slide, please. The program has 6 levels of staff credentials that are determined by coursework, training, degree, and experience, and these are detailed here and on the next slide. In this slide, the preparation column on the left side of the table shows professional opportunities for childcare teachers commencement with an individual's preparation and how they align with the credential levels in the childcare credential program. For example, a teacher with a level 2 credential who would have a minimum of 45 hours of training can be employed as a childcare aide or in a family childcare provider setting. However, an individual with a level 5 or 6 childcare credential who would have a degree in early childhood can be employed as a teacher or a childcare center director with 21 or more children. Alistair will present the next set of slides, starting with the Childcare Scholarship Program.
Thank you. And we will do questions, our first set of questions after Alistair presents.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much, Laura. So I'm going to talk briefly about the Child Care Scholarship Program, some background on it, the current state of things, and then some broader policy concerns before we do questions. So as you recall from an earlier slide, the Child Care Scholarship Program is really the bulk of what the state spends, 93% or so, on child care. The Child Care Scholarship Program is a state program that provides financial assistance to low-income families in order for those families to be able to place their children in childcare. The program is jointly funded by state funds and federal child care and development funds, and those federal funds establish broad programmatic requirements that each state must adhere to when providing this program. MSDE is the body in the state of Maryland that administers the program. Participating families, in order to qualify for the program, you must meet a particular income threshold or be eligible for federal support programs and be working or enrolled in a school or a training program to receive a job. Families, the way the program works is families receive a voucher to purchase childcare services, and then MSDE reimburses the providers where those families choose to enroll their children at a market survey rate, adjusted based on the Excel's quality level. Next slide, please. For each child who needs care, an eligible family receives a voucher, as I said, that indicates the scholarship rate that they will receive to pay for childcare and an assigned copayment. Participating families then use the vouchers to purchase childcare. If the rate that is charged by the childcare provider differs significantly from the voucher rate plus the copayment rate, families may be required to pay that additional amount. Next slide, please. So here we have a list of what the current income thresholds are per families. This is currently set at 75% of the state median income based on your family size. The current rate for the initial assessment is that you have an annual income of $76,000 if you're a family of 2, which goes all the way up to almost $168,000 if you're a family of 12. The redetermination amount is a bit higher if you get the scholarship and then redetermine for an additional scholarship. Next slide, please. The program, as it works for providers, requires that a provider be a licensed childcare center or registered family childcare home, or in some very limited circumstances, an informal type of provider that is approved by the State Department of Education. Child care centers and child care homes that participate must also participate in the Excels program. The rates that the program pays are based on the market rate survey that MSDE does periodically. Rates vary depending on the age of the child, the region that the family receives childcare in, whether the child is provided by a child care center or by a family child care home, and the quality of the program. Next slide, please. So here we have the average rates that are paid in the way Maryland does it. We divide things into 7 different regions, which are titled with these letters. You can see that the rates vary all the way from $175 for a 2-year-old in Caroline, Dorchester, Kent, Somerset, and Wacomico County, up to $378 in the Baltimore, Frederick, and Hartford area. These rates are adjusted based both, as you can see here in this slide, on the age of the child and the region, and then they're adjusted again by quality level. Next slide, please. So here we have a slide that shows the rates that the program has worked at over time. Back in 2017, this program had been stagnant for several years and the rates had not been adjusted for quite some time. The rate was set at the 9th percent market rate, meaning that what the program would pay out was out of reach for all but 9% of all what providers charged in the state, and the eligibility to qualify for the program was set at 32% of state median income, which was, I think, at the time, roughly $29,000. The General Assembly passed in 2017 chapters 209 and 210 to require MSDE to start doing periodic market rate surveys and calculating what it would take to adjust those two things. So beginning in 2018, MSDE began bringing up both the income eligibility threshold, allowing more families to participate in the program, and the market rate threshold, allowing more and more programs to qualify for payments. So in 2018, it was 20% of the market rate that the payments were made and 50% of state median income. In 2019, it was 30% of the market rate and 75% of state median income. In 2020, it was increased to 60th% of the market rate. And in 2022, the current situation, the program pays out at 70th percentile of the market rate, meaning that all but 70% of programs are covered and 75% of state median income. Next slide, please. I think the biggest state programmatic change in legislation to the program in recent years was chapters 525 and 526 of 2022, which made several changes to these programs and were sponsored by 2 of the wonderful delegates on this in this briefing, Delegate Solomon and Julie Plakovich-Carr. The legislation sought to address several issues with how the scholarship recipients were processed, how payments were made to providers, and other things. So this legislation created a presumptive eligibility process, which allowed recipients of the program who averred that they were eligible for it to receive 60 days of benefits while their applications were being processed, reducing delays in needing childcare and having to go through the application process to get it. It also required the State Department of Education to cover co-payments for families who are participating in a list of public benefit programs like temporary cash assistance, SNAP, and those sorts of things. Prior to this, Maryland calculated, when we were calculating the income that a family had in order to be eligible for the program, child support payments were included in that income. This bill excluded them, allowing more access to the program. And finally, this bill required MSDE to notify the comptroller within 10 days of receiving an invoice from a provider and for the comptroller to pay that provider within 5 days. I think anecdotally, I've heard that this drastically shortened the time frame by which providers were paid. It used to be something like 30 days and is now done in a much shorter time period. Next slide, please. Alongside Maryland's changes to the Child Care Scholarship Program, which really kicked off in 2017, the federal program was also changed during this time. Maryland had already made a lot of the program changes that the federal program required, which just reflect how different the program is today and how much more generous and uh, inclusive it is than it was. Here are some of the changes the federal program made in this rule that was finalized in the spring of 2024. Family co-payments were limited to no more than 7% of a family's household income. The income eligibility period for families was increased to 12 months, meaning that you didn't have to recertify your eligibility until a year had passed. It required prospective enrollment-based payments, meaning that rather than the child care providers uh, submitting paperwork and getting paid back, they were paid preemptively for the students who enrolled in the program. There were encouragements of presumptive eligibility or other fast track methods for getting people enrolled in the program, and states were directed to use grants to expand the supply of child care programs. Next slide, please. So the current status of the Child Care Scholarship Program, because there have been so many changes in the last 8 years, the landscape is vastly different than it was in 2017 when the market rate payment was set at 9% and the state median income was very low. At that point in time, roughly 12,000 children were enrolled in the program. Today, at the start of this current fiscal year, it was nearly 400% more. 46,295 children were enrolled in the program. Um, in addition to the changes in the composition of the program, there have been changes to the spending that is associated with the program. In 2021, approximately 2/3 of the program revenue came from federal funding. This increased during the COVID-19 federal stimulus funds, where the rate went up to a little over 70% for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. However, after the temporary federal funds receded, spending on the program has remained at historic levels of $500 million being spent in fiscal years 2024 and 2025. And now state funding makes up roughly 85% of the revenue that is spent by the program, up from a third and even as low as 29% or so in those two fiscal years. Next slide, please. Here we have you can see the source of funding over time. You could see how much federal funding was 92 out of 135 million in fiscal year 2021. You can see the introduction of the COVID-19 funds, which started in fiscal year 2022, peaked in 23, and remained a little bit in 24. And you can see the rise in 2023 of deficiency funds that needed to be spent on the program. These are funds that were not originally budgeted for, but that MSDE needed to spend to keep the program afloat. Next slide, please. Here, hopefully pleasing Delegate Ebersol, we can see the same information in graphical form. The light blue line is the general fund deficiency funds, and you can see how there is just a large increase from the slightly over $100 million that were spent on the program in 2021 to what is currently around 500 million. These figures are a little bit out of date. This is based on the budget analysis from our last budget year when we were making the budget for fiscal year 2026, but it gives you a good rough idea of how the program has changed over time. Next slide, please. Because of this, thank you, Sarah. Because of this increase in funding and the ongoing deficiency that existed over the past couple fiscal years, the State Department of Education implemented this program freeze that we are currently operating under. Originally, as the chair said at the start of this meeting, it was planned to only last until September, when MSD estimated that participation in the program would go down to roughly 40,000 from what they estimated of a high of 45,000. This has not really been the case. With the freeze announced, applications went up quite a bit over the course of the first quarter and a half of this current year, peaking the week before the freeze went into effect on April 1st of 2,383 new applicants. It took MSD some time to process this, but by June, all those people who qualified were into the system, and there were 47,806 children receiving benefits. And this was up over 4,000 from just the day before the freeze went into effect. Next slide, please. Because of this MSDE, because the freeze is still in effect, MSDE has implemented a wait list. And as long as the remains in place, the wait list will grow. The latest quarterly report that the State Department of Education issued showed that there are currently 2,706 children on the wait list and 1,928 families on the wait list. But although the program is frozen, there are certain children who remain eligible to get a scholarship even if they were not on the wait list earlier. This includes children on temporary cash assistance, children who receive Social Security insurance, and the siblings of currently existing children. Since the freeze has gone into effect, 1,308 children have been enrolled as of the last quarterly report. More today, assuredly, have been enrolled in the program. Of those, just over 80% came from the sibling category, and just under 20% came from those two dependency categories. Next slide, please. So taking a step back and talking about the general situation that Maryland finds itself in, the annual cost to, as alluded to by the chair at the start of this meeting and by Laura earlier, to get every every child who's from birth to age 2 enrolled in childcare would be roughly $2.6 billion. Although it's expensive, the Child Care Scholarship Program does a lot to provide care to some of those children, particularly the poorest. Recent laws passed by the legislature are designed to improve childcare supply and affordability. That list of bills that the General Assembly passed last year attacked the problem in a number of different ways, trying to ease regulation on childcare in-home family providers, trying to look at what regulatory changes can be made, and asking state entities to provide childcare on site if at all feasible. Also, the Excels in Childcare Credential program are designed to improve the quality of kids, as we talked about, and those have been things that the General Assembly has continued to fund. Next slide, please. One story that has been out there a lot in this world and has gotten a lot of attention is the universal childcare that New Mexico is doing. New Mexico is in a bit of a unique position in which they are able to have revenue coming in from oil and gas, and they have created an early childhood education trust fund in which they have put some of that revenue. Starting on Saturday, they are putting in place a situation in which all kids qualify for universal childcare. They have a similar program as the Child Care Scholarship Program in which people get subsidies to provide care to children, and they're lifting off, I think it's currently in New Mexico, 85% of the state median income, but they're lifting it to, I'm sorry, I think it's much higher. I think it's something like 400% of the federal poverty line. They're opening it up to everyone in the state. They're aiming to expand the workforce and recruit new teachers with this program. They are constructing new facilities. They have funds specifically dedicated to that, and they are setting a minimum wage of $18 that each child care provider is going to get. So this is a costly but potential future for how childcare is approached in the state. Next slide, please. Finally, to leave you with some thoughts about the 2026 session, I think it's fair to say that the federal situation with regards to this program and many others remains precarious. Funding levels are in flux, and federal policies have been changed a lot, including those that have been finalized recently. So we could see a situation in which those final rules I talked about that were published just last year in the spring could be changed. Some policy questions that should be on the mind of everyone going into the 2026 session is, can more be done to address the structural challenges to childcare, the ease of entry, the retention of professionals? Are different approaches needed here? And also, what sorts of policies that govern the childcare scholarship programs are the correct ones? Is the structure of the waitlist that currently exists, in which certain people, those who have siblings and those who are in federal programs. Is that the correct structure? Should the program be focused on the poorest children, or on all children? And funding questions, what are the costs for the Child Care Scholarship Program? So with that, I turn it back to you, Madam Chair, to ask questions of me and my great colleague Laura. I should just say before I do that I want to thank Kyra Barron, who helped me with some of the research for this and helped Delegates Solomon and Plavkovich Carr in our small Ways and Means work group. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you to both of you for your presentation. I will look on the screen to see if there are any questions. Folks, please just raise your hand. Well, I see a couple hands, but I will just say, I think those that are listening, and of course, my colleagues on both committees, understand why this is such, it continues to be such an important issue. I think we can all agree that salaries that our childcare workers earn are not a living wage. They are not receiving benefits. I think we can all agree that the margins that the professionals who have a child care facility or have a family-run center, are not making lots of money. We just saw that the margins are very slim. The accreditation process is 2 years. So while you're trying to run your facility and manage the ratios and the kids and keep child care educators in your doors, you're supposed to go ahead and work on this 2-year accreditation initially or every 5 years, and that's part of the hubs that we created a couple years ago through legislation is supposed to help with that. And I know we're still working through some of those issues. And given what we're going through at the federal level and with layoffs and furloughs, childcare is increasingly important for folks who are working and not getting paid, for those who are not working and not getting paid and maybe taking on additional employment during this time because they don't know how long they're going to be furloughed. So this continues to be a critical issue for our state, and I'm really happy that folks on both of these committees are really committed to this issue. So I'm just going to go in the order that I saw hands pop up on my screen. So first, Delegate Plavkovich Carr, who is the subcommittee chair for the Ways and Means Early Childhood Subcommittee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding this briefing on this really important topic. And I would agree wholeheartedly with you that these programs have been really key in the state, but clearly face a lot of challenges that we need to face this session. So I have 3 questions. So Alistair and Laura, feel free to be efficient with your answers on this. First, I wanted to ask about, for the scholarship program, how exactly is family income eligibility determined? Like, I'm thinking particularly of like a case where maybe someone was a federal worker, was laid off. Their household income before would not have been eligible, but now they would be. If you just look at their, current household income, it's not clear to me from MSDE's information about exactly how their income and eligibility would be determined.
So I would have to get back to you on that about the exact specifics. I think it's covered in the State Department of Ed's regulations that govern this and what the income things that count are. But I don't know off the top of my head, so I'm happy to answer offline.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm wondering also, has there been any analysis of how the ongoing freeze for the scholarship program is affecting workforce participation in the state? We saw in the report from the Comptroller's Office last year how important childcare is in terms of workforce participation, especially for young moms.
I can't speak to any specific research into that, but I think that to the extent that childcare providers rely on these slots year in and year out, and they're being frozen, that could be a difficulty in knowing how reliably how to budget for your year. And I think that could be another pressure that drives people out of the market.
Okay. And last question, do we have any sense of how many childcare workers are currently receiving the scholarship? As the chair said, pay for workers is pretty low, and they might just be eligible in and of themselves. Does the data from MSDE allow us to ascertain how many childcare providers actually are currently receiving the scholarship or might be eligible?
I don't think that that's any data that's been published that speak to that, but I do think that MSDE has been looking into that and may be able to get an answer back. So I will again check offline with you and talk to them behind the scenes.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Delegate Ebersol, who is the Education Subcommittee Chair on Ways and Means.
Yeah, and I serve on early childhood too, so I'm very proud to be there. And I'm crunching some numbers as everybody gives me a hard time for doing, but everybody can do this. First of all, we've increased the number of people receiving this almost fourfold since 2018, which is outstanding. Now we're frozen, and if I read your number correctly, we got about 47,000 children into the program right before the freeze. 47, almost 48,000, if I read it right. Okay, but then the slide also said that 2,700 are going to be waitlisted according to that. Now that would put us over 50,000, by the way, if we could provide for them, which would be a nice milestone to get over. However, my question is is that 2,700 number indicative of the number of students that are out there? Or are we just looking at people who've applied on the wait list? I mean, do we have any way of predicting how many more children might be on the list, might be eligible that we need to get in? Or is 2,700 kind of bring us to a good place? Because it seems like it's not that big a number, relatively speaking.
No, that's just the number of people who've applied. And when you apply, there's a lot of information on MSD's website when you go to it that there is currently a freeze in place. I think Laura had an earlier slide that there's something like roughly 300,000 children
Right,
in the state
right.
that need childcare. I think not all of those obviously would choose to participate in the program, but I think quite a few might if it was fully universal in the way New Mexico's program is.
So you might be suggesting that if we had an application process that didn't put people off saying that we're frozen, we might get a larger wait list, which might encourage us to go forward. I mean, that's a rhetorical question, but it looks like we could maybe change the application to encourage people to get on the wait list. Not a
think that was
question,
short.
just a statement anyway. So thanks. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. I want to back up with Chair Ebersol's remarks about the New Mexico plan and maybe get a little bit more information. Do we have any initial data on what the cost implementation would be to bring universal childcare into reality in Maryland?
I mean, we have that rough estimate that it would be $2.6 billion possibly. I think New Mexico budgeted something like what we're budgeting for the Child Care Scholarship Program last year for of state funds to go to this universal care, which is something like 460 million, I think. I can talk to you offline about the specific figure. They also pulled some additional money from their land trust grants, I think, for the thing. But I think the program is not set up yet for universal care there, and it's going to play out and take some time over time as they implement things. But I think it could be significantly different cost in the state. Laura might have better answers than that.
No, I don't think I think Alistair's right. It was about $500 million to start, but they were expecting it to be higher because they're going to, open it up to 100% of all children. So they're expecting those costs to go up. And yeah, the assessment we did for the 2.6 billion just took into account, we used MFN and MSD numbers to look at the average amount childcare, which is about $12,000 or so, and just associate that with all children who would need like just birth to two care. So it would be more expensive to provide that care, but that was just kind of our rough estimate.
And I don't necessarily expect an answer to this question. It's my only other question is is there any data that shows the savings that happen when we universally create programs versus the amount of time and resource allocation that we have to spend in order to, decide who is and it's not applicable to a program and do enforcement? Is there any data around showing what this could be, potential cost savings could be?
I don't think that's super specific in that way, but there are numbers of studies that show access to high quality, affordable childcare have greater results later in life, that there's greater graduation from college, greater medical rates, better employment, less incarceration, things of that nature. I don't know if anyone's costed it out specifically, and it becomes very difficult to do that over the course of, 30 years or something, but there are a lot of studies that show that. Yeah.
Yeah, but just to clarify, I meant like for the cost upfront to the state itself, to implement a program that divides the children into people who can apply and can't apply for the program. If we just make it universal, is there any data that shows that when we universalize programs that it can save the state money in addition to costing the state more money to implement for everybody? There is savings in the fact that we don't have to spend as much money on the implementation questions and enforcement questions. I promise I'll stop there. Anything at all?
Not that I'm aware of. I can touch base with you online. Definitely not an expert on this though, so very likely there could be.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, Delegate Miracle North.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all those that played a part in bringing this together. It's a very popular topic in my district, so I appreciate this opportunity. I had a couple follow-up questions actually to what has already been said. I know uh, Delegate Plockvich-Carr asked about who is getting the money as childcare workers. Is it possible to get even more detail as to who those childcare workers are? I know, for instance, in my district, there is a faith group that uses this money to help parents who are going into recovery meetings and offering childcare. So when we say childcare workers, I just want to be clear as to who they are in the grand scheme of things. My second question is also a data question related to New Mexico. We talked about 300, I think it's 300 kids are in need of childcare. Is that comparable to New Mexico? We talked about the money, but is there a similar need in New Mexico to justify why they start up with the $500 million and whatnot? So those are my two questions. They're all data related, so I can talk it offline, but I want to just bring it to your attention.
Yeah, we do have some data on the who makes up the childcare population in the state. The comptroller had a report last year that has some data in it, and MSDE periodically has to do these market rate surveys for childcare. So they did one at the end of last year, which is not a complete census survey of everyone, but it is a survey that captures something like 50 to 60% of the childcare providers using also the childcare scholarship data. I can happy to send you those things which have some data breakdown. Um, I think that there are fewer children birth to age 2 in New Mexico, but I don't have that data readily available.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for everyone for bringing this information to our attention. My question really has to do with the child care. Well, two questions. The child care providers, because the pay and rates that I heard are kind of really disturbing to me, and I'm just wondering who is it that who is it that has these licenses and that have decided to
They put a freeze on childcare because we ran out of money. The thing of it is, have they done an audit?
Delegate Long, can you put yourself on mute? Thank you. Go ahead, Delegate Roberts.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, because it's got to be hard to make a living with this kind of income, and I'm really glad to see the legislation that was passed to help them get paid faster. But with what they're getting paid right now, how is it that we are going to be able to get more people to become childcare providers? And then also, I just had a question about New Mexico as well. Are there, and I don't know if I missed this, but are there is there cost of childcare? Is cost of childcare in New Mexico comparable to Maryland's cost of childcare. That's
I
it. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I believe it's a little bit lower than here. I think in the comptroller's report last year, she highlighted that in Maryland, there are many other jobs that are comparable in terms of pay that have fewer qualifications that are needed than childcare, and that in Maryland there are more available jobs, at least at the time, and may be different today, but when that was published at the end of last year, in November of last year, that there were like 1.8 job openings per person unemployed, which is higher than New Mexico. And I think that just like generally state salaries are higher in this state than in New Mexico. I think, you know, it is a very tricky situation in which the costs that people are paid are pretty low and the cost for parents is pretty high. And it really has to be a labor of love, I think. But hopefully that answers questions.
Okay. Subcommittee Chair Stephanie Smith from Appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me again. Okay, good, because I have my earbuds on. So hello, everyone. Stephanie Smith. I'm from Appropriations. I chair Education Economic Development, where we oversee all funding for MSDE, including the Child Care Scholarship. So we're really excited to be here with our Ways and Means colleagues because we're going to need revenue in order to make the budget that we're discussing here, right? They go together. That's why we're sister committees. I wanted to unpack a little bit more about the economic impact of childcare, because I think we often and appropriately for this hearing, our briefing rather, are focused on what are the consumer costs to actually pay for your child to get the care they need, particularly safe, high quality care. But on the flip side, I know the comptroller has discussed this in part in her report, Delegate Ebersol and I, when we recently attended the SREB Legislative Advisory Council meeting and were briefed at the Atlanta Fed, there was a strong discussion around childcare. And in many instances, what distinguished Maryland from other states in that conversation is that they were discussing childcare almost squarely as economic infrastructure, not simply a nice thing to do for a kid. So I wanted to know if we have more data about just the pure economic impact, not just on people that are currently in the workforce, but on how it impacts even the expansion of businesses and the attraction of businesses to locating their businesses in Maryland. Because if we are one of the most expensive states to get childcare, those are going to be relevant costs, concerns, and considerations that those in the private sector that create jobs might really want to see more leadership from us in a economic development conversation as expanding upon the consumer needs. And I want to know if we have more data related to that side of the impact of childcare.
Chair Smith, I didn't look as broadly as you're asking about, what that actually means for the state. I kind of just generally gave that framework about how it increases productivity, but it's an excellent question. So I can definitely do some digging for you and just see like what that would be. And, I can provide that and see if we actually have some hard numbers, because I think that's what you're asking for. And that probably is out there somewhere, but and I will happily do the research. It's an excellent question.
Not to put you on the spot, I just wanted to introduce that framing into the conversation, because there are other states, quite frankly, that are competitor states to Maryland, and this work doesn't even live in their education agencies. It lives in the Department of Commerce or something that's focused on economics. So just something for our global awareness.
Okay, Delegate Salmon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Chairs, and thank you to Alistair and Laura. You all have been just such wonderful partners, and really appreciate the incredible staff work that you all put in to help us make a lot of these changes. And this was a fantastic briefing. I think a really good summation of what we've done, where we're going, and what kind of challenges we're going to have going forward. And to Delegate Roberts's point, one of the tough decisions we had to make last year on the budget front was MSDE delayed the provider payment increase rate they pushed it out 6 months and adjusted it with inflation a little bit downwards. So in addition to more affordability issues for families, Delegate Roberts is spot on, where we've got to make sure we're paying our providers more. The question I had for the two of you, and I know it's something that MSDE is working on as well, but was curious if you had gotten any data from them yet, on the freeze piece, I know one of the impacts is obviously that if you're a provider who may have vacancies, the distribution of availability of slots may not overlap with where kids are getting in as exemptions for the freeze. So you could have a provider that loses 10 kids just through attrition or, aging out. And obviously they may not be able to fill those slots with anybody in their community who falls under those exemptions. So I'm curious if there's been any data reported yet from MSD on what the impact on those providers might be if we're seeing additional provider loss because of the freeze. And I know Laura Wildryer from MFN may have some thoughts on this too. But curious if you've gotten any numbers from MSD yet.
I don't believe that we do, but I'm happy to check with them and follow up with you later.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I do not see any other questions. So thank you very much, Alistair and Laura. And next we will move to the executive director of the Maryland Family Network, Miss Laura Wheeldryer. Thank you. And whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Chair Smith, honorable members. I'm Laura Wheeldryer, Executive Director of Maryland Family Network, and I'm actually thrilled to be here with you today for such rich conversation, great questions, which brings me to my first point, which is I want to thank you for your leadership on childcare. Alistair talked about New Mexico, and sure, gas money is helpful, but sweeping changes like that don't happen without vision and leadership. So many of you have led on the hard work it's taken to make all these recent improvements a reality. We thank the speaker for her longstanding commitment to childcare. We want to acknowledge the administration's increased investment in childcare scholarship, and we want to thank the department for their interest in improving customer service. All of this is good for Maryland. The Child Care Scholarship Program enrollment freeze presents challenges, to say the least. Families are stuck, they're frustrated and unsure when the freeze may be lifted. That wait list is a dynamic wait list that's incredibly hard to manage. Alistair showed you numbers, but I want you to please consider numbers of families who are on the waiting list now. I would like you to please consider that those numbers are a gross undercount because many families are walking away and not even applying for the Child Care Scholarship Program when they find out there's a freeze in place. So it's tough to accept a job or make plans for your family when you can't access childcare. We remember probably not just MFN, but many of you as well, the last time there was a wait list in place. And at that time, we spoke with families who were forced to choose less desirable childcare options. They reported care situations that were unreliable and what they described as low quality. An enrollment freeze limits parents' ability to provide opportunities for their children, which is, I think we all know, universally what parents want to be able to do. When childcare is unreliable, those breakdowns impact the child, the parents, and our economy. A consistent caregiver and decreased parental stress are important factors for children's healthy development. At MFN, we've studied the impact of childcare breakdowns on employers too. Lost productivity, increased staff absences, and turnover all lead to overwhelming losses for Maryland's economy. I will be blunt. The economy is incredibly challenging and people have to work. And when we allow an inadequate childcare system to limp along, we're basically incentivizing unregulated care and ignoring the needs of families. We all suffer as a result of an inadequate childcare system. We also recognize the funding constraints you're facing. I'd like to sign on as the lead champion for Chair Atterbury's stance that we lift the enrollment freeze. But short of that, let's not go backwards. Families and our economy cannot sustain an undoing of the progress we've made. The reimbursement rates, the eligibility levels, the workforce supports, All of it is necessary. This is an investment in a child's foundation. As you know, so much critical brain development happens in those first early years. I hope we continue to make policy choices that support the caregivers who are committed to this field. Yeah, it's a labor of love is a nice way to put it, Alistair. It's not a huge money-making profession, but we could be doing so much more to create pathways to entry and to high quality, and that don't make it harder for families to find high quality childcare for their children. Our youngest Marylanders need trusted caregivers so they can thrive, so they can arrive at school ready, and so that their parents can work. Spending in the early years is an investment with unparalleled return on that investment. Healthy children, strong families, a soaring economy and employment numbers, and the success of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which is another enormous investment you all have championed. We know you're going to have, to put it mildly, a lot of work ahead of you this session. Maryland Family Network looks forward to continuing to work with you to meet the needs of families with young children. We thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, again, please just raise your hand. I will just start quickly. You mentioned that families are walking away, which is understandable from applying because they know there's a freeze. Is there any way to put a number on that so we know how many families are walking away? Is that's just kind of anecdotal?
I'm afraid it's anecdotal. We,
Okay.
as you may know, run the network of childcare resource centers, and we run this service that helps families find childcare called Locate Childcare. So this is the kind of anecdotal feedback we're hearing through those kind of frontline supports and
Okay.
providers.
Okay. Any questions from either committee members? Okay, I think everybody used up all their questions. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, committees, I will just close out by just stressing again that ending this freeze is going to be a priority of mine this next session. And I believe that everyone on this hearing believes that there should be an end to the freeze with everything that we have going on. Federally, we need to be helping folks who take care of our little people. We need to make sure they're earning a living wage. We need to make sure that people can actually go to work. I relied heavily. I would not have been in the General Assembly if I could not take my kids to a child care provider. I just would not have been able to work. I also want to reiterate, and we did some work on this issue a couple of years ago in 1441, when we're talking about pathways for our childcare educators. I truly believe that, it is a labor of love, like Alistair said, and those that have been there for years and requiring them to get this certification and that degree and this, they probably could teach those courses, right? They are teaching kids to read. They're teaching kids to be potty trained. They're teaching kids math. They're teaching kids social skills. And so our educators and childcare centers who have been there for a long time, I think deserve that respect when it comes to career pathways. So with that, I will say have a happy Halloween, everyone. And thank you for hopping on. And thank you to everyone who presented. And thank you to Sarah and the folks in appropriations who helped put this all together. Thank you. Bye.